Hello everyone, and welcome to the City of Puyallup's virtual community kickoff presentation for the Puyallup Housing Action Plan. Thank you for joining me. My name is Katie Baker, and I'm the Planning Manager here at the City of Puyallup. In this presentation, we'll look at a few key takeaways about housing trends from our housing needs assessment, which we recently completed as the first step in developing our housing action plan. We'll talk about trends in housing costs, production, and inventory. Housing costs are rising faster than incomes, and households across the income spectrum are affected by the lack of a broad and affordable set of housing choices. The chart at left shows that since 2010, Puyallup home values have increased by 61%. During the same time period, incomes in the city increased by only 25%. This comparison of home values and median incomes shows how difficult it is for would-be buyers to afford a home in the city. Currently in Puyallup, the monthly payments for an average-priced home are only considered affordable for households earning about $98,000 or more annually. The limited supply of affordable entry-level housing has put homeownership out of reach for many local households. While rental rates have increased as much as home values, there's a limited amount of rental housing available. Further, there are very few lower-cost rental units available, with the average rents in Puyallup as high as $1,500 per month. Let's look at the impact of housing costs and cost burden on health, homelessness, and the workforce. 32% of Puyallup's households pay more than 30% of their incomes for housing, a metric that's known as cost burden. Cost burden affects well-being and health in significant ways, as households facing cost burden have less money to spend on food, healthcare, and transportation. Households with modest incomes, older residents, and renter households are particularly affected by cost burden. Households with older residents or children are especially affected by cost burden's impact on medical care and nutrition. Let's talk a little bit about homelessness. While many factors contribute to unsheltered and displaced households, high housing costs are certainly one key reason. A count of evictions reveals that from 2008 to 2017, Puyallup saw a relatively consistent annual count of court-documented evictions, at an average of 157 evictions per year. However, vulnerability to displacement is not evenly distributed across the city. Areas with the highest vulnerability concerns include areas in central and south Puyallup along the east of State Route 512. Other areas of high vulnerability concerns include areas in North Puyallup to the west of State Route 512. High housing costs also impact Puyallup's workforce. Many workers who serve the community cannot afford to live here. According to census data, Puyallup's workers have lower incomes than Puyallup's residents. Given their lower incomes and our city's lack of housing that is affordable to households with modest incomes, many workers make difficult trade-offs, such as living in substandard housing or moving to areas where housing is cheaper. For example, almost a quarter of Puyallup's workers commute from 10 to 24 miles away each day to come to work in Puyallup. Decades of systemic racism and housing policy have caused inequities for many households. As you can see at left, Puyallup has unequal rates of homeownership when disaggregated by race. Puyallup's citywide rate of home ownership is 53%. White residents are homeowners at nearly the same rate as the city as a whole, which reflects the high proportion of Puyallup's residents that identify as white. 68% of Asian households are homeowners, significantly higher than the citywide rate. Black and Hispanic households are homeowners at significantly lower rates than the citywide rate, at 37% and 15% respectively. As shown at right, we also see different rates of crowding in households by race and ethnicity. The extent of crowding can shed light on trade-offs households make to reduce their housing costs. Crowding is most prevalent in Hispanic or Latino households. It should be noted that not all crowding is related to unsuitable housing. This can also reflect different cultural norms and preferences for living arrangements, such as multi-generational living. Puyallup's current housing inventory is comprised mostly of single-family housing. and recent housing production trends mostly follow our existing housing composition. Unfortunately, this is poorly matched to the needs of our local households. Puyallup's current housing stock lacks the variety that would be reflective of our population's diverse needs and preferences. One way of understanding whether the housing stock supports our population's needs is to compare the size of housing units to the size of households, which you can see in the charts at the bottom of the slide. What we see is that current housing stock is poorly matched to the household sizes, with an undersupply of smaller units and units with 5 or more bedrooms. Last, we'll talk a bit about housing production. As Puyallup's population grows, we need to add new housing, a total of 7,853 additional units by 2035 to meet population growth. While the local housing production rate in Puyallup has increased in recent years, it still falls short of what we need. This keeps pressure on housing prices and rents and limits housing options for many Puyallup residents. The average annual production of housing units in Puyallup from 2010 to 2019 was 151 units per year, but Puyallup needs more than triple that amount to an average of 491 units per year to meet estimated household growth by 2035. If current housing production trends continue, house prices and rents will continue to rise and further limit housing options for many Puyallup residents. While subsidized housing can meet the needs of residents of the lowest incomes, the scale of need far exceeds available supply of units. If you'd like to learn more about the Housing Action Plan, check out our other short videos on our project webpage at cityofpuyallup.org/Housing Action Plan. We would love for you to share your thoughts and stay involved in the Housing Action Plan process, and we have a few ways for you to do that. Through the remainder of 2020, we have an online survey and online ideas wall for you to share your ideas. We hope that you'll reflect on the findings I shared in this presentation and consider questions like, do the housing needs assessment findings reflect your experience and knowledge of Puyallup? What's missing from the story that the needs assessment tells? Thank you for joining me today, and I look forward to hearing your comments.